Hello and welcome to another edition of Local Heroes, brought to you by WKFK TV7 and the GI Museum in Goshen. As you can see behind me, we're not in the GI Museum in Goshen today. We're at the Mississippi Gulf Coast Military Collectors Show in D'Iberville. Now, if you've missed this show, which you have because this is going to air after the show, we'll let you know when the next one's going to be. But our guest today on Local Heroes is Mr. Mike Domin from Yazoo City, Mississippi. And Mike served in the United States Navy from 1966 to 1970. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Could you tell us how you got into the Navy and give us a little history there?
Well, sir, I joined the Navy in 1966. My goal at the time was to be a Navy hospital corpsman. And I went to Great Lakes Navy Training Center up in Great Lakes, Illinois for my boot camp. And immediately following that, I went through the Navy Hospital Corps School. Learned all about first aid, patient care, and necessity to become a hospital corpsman. Following that,
did you work in a hospital somewhere?
Yes.
For a
Following
while?
that, I went to Navy Hospital, Portsmouth, Virginia.
And that's kind of like an OJT,
Right.
on-job training.
Right,
Oh, okay.
and worked in patient care, and so forth. And following that, I got orders to go with the Marines to take care of the first aid medical needs of the Marines. Transferred down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and went through Marine Field Medical Service School there. And,
For the folks at home,
Right.
the Marines don't have their
Right,
own medics like
exactly.
the Army or other services. Do they have
Exactly right.
Navy corpsmen?
Right. The Navy trains all the medical personnel, the doctors, the nurses, and the corpsmen to take care of the Marines. Glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, so you went to Camp Lejeune.
Right. I was at Camp Lejeune with the 2nd Marine Division following Field Medical Service School. My MOS was an 8404, which is a Field Medical Service Technician, a glorified way of saying a field medic.
Yeah.
But anyway, I took care of the Marines there at the 2nd Marine Division, Camp Lejeune, for about 2 years, and then I got orders to go to Westpac to the Vietnam War, which is going on. It's hard to believe it's been 40 years ago that
That
occurred.
happened to you,
That's right. But anyway, I got sent with a unit called a Combined Action Platoon or Combined Action Program there outside Da Nang.
You arrived in Vietnam in Da Nang.
Right, in 1969.
1969.
Right, August of 1969. And was trained at this Combined Action Program school, sort of part of the Vietnamization program, you know. And I was assigned to a group of about 12 Marines, 12 Vietnamese Popular Forces, and of course 1 Navy corpsman to take care of them. And we had about a 3-mile AO, area of operations, that we worked in, and I held medical med caps to take care of the local people, any of their illnesses or injuries or whatever came up, actually.
So you were the doctor.
I was a doctor.
You were the go-to for the medical,
Right.
For any of these villagers and any of the Marines you were with and any of the Vietnamese troops you were with?
In fact, the Vietnamese called us Box C.
Box
C, which was Vietnamese for doctor. We were the nearest thing to a doctor they had, and I was proud to do what I
bet you
had
saw
to
some
do.
interesting cases.
I did. We went on patrols, and of course a few of our Marines got hurt, a few of them got killed, unfortunately. But I was proud to be there to help, and hopefully glad to say I saved a few lives. And anyway.
Did you get in any firefights when you were out on the sweeps and patrols?
Absolutely. Of course, the daytimes we'd go on patrols, and it was pretty dangerous daytime. Of course, the nighttime is when all the real action occurred. Nighttime, the enemy came out because they didn't have to worry about the helicopters and things flying over and being seen. But
so what was the purpose of these sweeps and these patrols that you were doing in this 3-mile area of operations? Just
we were mainly
keeping track of the villagers?
Keeping track of the villagers, trying to maintain peace in those areas, and try to make them understand that we were there to help them and not endanger them. But of course, we were attacked many times, for no reason. But by and large, I think we were able to make the local people see the value of what we were trying to do. But anyway.
The Viet Cong would often infiltrate these villages and threaten villagers and even kill some of them.
Right.
And tell them, if you don't support us,
Right.
more of this is going to happen.
Right.
So the whole purpose of this Marine detachment and these Vietnamese troops
Right.
was to prevent that and
Right.
to try to swing them to our side, so to speak.
Right. Right.
That was what y'all were
Right.
doing.
Right.
And the Viet Cong obviously didn't like you being
They
in
didn't
that
like
area.
us being there. Right. They wanted to rule their area, and they didn't want any interference from
It
that.
seems like a small number of Marines, though, to be out. Did you say 12 Marines?
Right.
That's not quite a
Well,
big group of guys.
No, it's not. But
how were you getting your support?
well, we had the radio man that could, call in air support for us, or artillery, whatever we needed.
And you were getting resupplied
And
by
resupplied
helicopter?
by helicopters every day, of course. And if anybody was injured, we could just call in a dust-off
Yes.
Huey helicopter and medevac people out as quickly as they could. We were about 5 minutes away from Da Nang and the NSA hospital or Freedom Hill Hospital.
Yeah, that was a
very
good facility, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So I can imagine what your living conditions must have been like out in these villages.
Right.
You were
yeah.
like living with the locals,
Right,
basically.
Right. We
You-
moved around. We never stayed at the same place each night. We moved to a different location.
Which is a wise move.
Right. Right. And we'd, of course, at nighttime we'd form a circular perimeter. Marines all on the outside of the perimeter, standing guard. And in the center of the circle, there were three people that were the most valuable, so to speak: the platoon sergeant, the
You were
radio
one of
man,
them.
and the medic.
You
And
were
I
one
was
of
glad they took care of me. Absolutely.
You were
Absolutely.
very valuable to those
Right.
guys.
Well, as
you
long
were
as-
life.
As long as I knew my job and took care of them, they protected me with their lives and treated me with the most respect I believe I've ever had in a year of my life.
Is it true that once the Marines really liked you and respected you and knew that you were good, they called you Doc?
Doc, right.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah, that's what we went by.
How did that
Doc.
feel? Had those Marines call you
It,
Doc?
It did feel good, absolutely. It was the most respect. I think they was, like I say, they treated us with as much respect as they did an officer, and I was
Did you ever
glad to
get any
feel that.
breaks from this? How long did you do this?
Well, in the bush and in the jungles, we out there for 8 or 10 days sometime, and then we'd come in, maybe go into Da Nang or go to an area where we could rest a little bit. And of course, I was able to go on R&R after 6 months, and I made it down to Sydney, Australia on the R&R.
Oh,
Down there.
I bet that was
Had
interesting.
a good chance to, really for 2 weeks, to get away there.
How was it?
It was wonderful, I tell you. Australia is a beautiful place.
I heard that the Australians really did like the GIs back then. They treated you like royalty, so to speak.
Absolutely, they did. Really.
Yeah, I bet you didn't want to go back.
It was hard to go back
And
in
then
a way.
then you get back into Vietnam and you're back out in the bush
Right,
doing the
it was
same
a
thing over again?
Total different world. I mean, just like going from heaven to hell almost. But
Were you back with the same group of 12
right,
guys?
same group, absolutely. I stayed out in the jungle with them for a total of 8 months, and at the end of 8 months, I was rotated back to the rear area in Da Nang, and I worked with as a medical regulator, talking on the radio to these medevac choppers, directing and triaging their patient loads to different locations.
Oh, okay.
Such
You were-
as the hospital ship, Sanctuary, which is out in the Gulf there,
Yes.
and also Freedom Hill and different other locations.
So you were kind of like the dispatcher of sorts. I mean, if
Right.
this hospital had a lot of patients, you would direct them to someplace else,
Right.
and even out into the Gulf to the hospital ship.
Right, it was like a triage assignment there for my last few months, which helped kind of psychologically prepare me for, to get myself together before I finished my tour of duty. But after my tour of duty was over, I was glad to get out, proud of what I'd done.
How did it feel to come back to the States?
It was wonderful. It was all they talked about. Going back to the world is truly a different world. United States.
How did you come back? Was it an aircraft?
I flew back on American Airlines on a flight out of Da Nang, Freedom Bird we called it.
Freedom Bird.
Absolutely. Caught the Freedom Bird out of Da Nang and flew to Okinawa and then to Honolulu and then into California. It's Travis Air Force Base, California was finally.
What kind of reception did you get when you got home to Travis Air Force Base?
Well, there weren't many civilians there, but you know, I left there and went down to Long Beach Naval Station to be processed out, and then left there, went to Los Angeles International Airport to go home. Of course, I was dressed in my dress uniform, and I felt like, you know, people treated me well at the time. I know there was a lot of hostilities toward the war, but I was proud to have served. I really was. My mother and dad both served in the military in World War II, the Coast Guard. My mother, Sybil Domin, she's now deceased. My dad, Mike Domin. They met at the end of World War II in St. Augustine, Florida, and I was born a year afterwards, 1946.
Mike, we're going to have to stop you right there because it's going to take a little break, but we'll come back. We'll talk more about that. Don't go away. More local heroes right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV7. Today we're coming to you from the Military Collectors Show in D'Iberville, and we are talking to Mr. Mike Domin. Mr. Domin was a medic with the Marines in Vietnam. And Mike, could you tell us something about what it was like when you landed in Da Nang in Vietnam and you got off that C-130? What was some of the things you remember?
The first thing I remember was the intense heat. The temperature was just hottest it was like a blast furnace. And after that was the smell, the terrible odor, the stench. It was I don't know if it was a garbage dump or something. It was right near the airport there, and the air just had a smell it smelled like decaying human waste or whatever, you know.
Unpleasant.
Unpleasant, absolutely, very unpleasant.
Now, after you're there in Da Nang for a while, you get sent out with these Marines.
Right.
And you're living in the jungle, basically.
Absolutely. Primitive conditions, no running water. The way we bathed, whatever, we'd go to a well or go to a stream if we could find one. Most of the time we couldn't find a stream. In certain areas we'd go to a well, and around noontime, the hottest time of the day, we'd draw some water, put it in our helmet, and take a washcloth, and of course pour some water over ourselves from my helmet, and just take a little sponge bath, so to speak. And that's the way we kept clean most of the time. I tried to encourage the Marines to change their socks every day. And
you were Doc. You had to tell them to do that because it hurt their feet.
Right, and we tried to encourage them to shave every day too. It's something to help your morale, just to stay clean and shaved. But it's hard to do all the time. We, of course, had to try to set the example and so that they would do that. But it was a losing battle a lot of times.
And it was hot all the time.
Hot all the time, yeah.
Wet.
Wet. Monsoon rains occur. That'd be last 2 or 3 months sometime. It would rain.
Never stopped.
Every day, almost, right. Yeah.
Well, when you finally tried to get some sleep at night, were you sleeping under a poncho, or did you just rolled up in on the ground?
We had these poncho liners, and we'd wrap up in them and sleep on the ground. They didn't like us to sleep inside these hooches or the huts over there, because somebody might come along and throw a grenade in there and kill you or something. They wanted to just kind of spread out a little bit.
Now, anybody that's been outside in South Mississippi at night, particularly in the summertime when it's hot and rainy, knows that there's a tremendous amount of bugs and insects. And in Vietnam, there was probably some worse conditions
mosquitoes.
As far as mosquitoes and bugs go.
Absolutely.
And snakes and all kind of
Well, I didn't see but one snake the whole time I was over there.
One snake?
It was one of those bamboo vipers.
That was a bad guy.
It was a bad one. But we killed it. We saw it before it saw us.
So if you're living out in these primitive conditions, obviously you're not getting a whole lot of hot chow every day.
No, absolutely. The sea rations were the main thing, a little round cardboard box like full of a few canned items like beans and bacon, or I can't think of all of the things. Bone chicken.
Chicken, spaghetti,
ham,
meat sauce.
ham and eggs.
Ham and lima beans.
Lima beans,
ham and
things
eggs.
like that, right. And we'd make our little stove out of one of the cans, of course.
Now, tell us how you open the can.
Oh, yeah, we had a little P38, a little can opener that they issued us. We kept that on our
Dog
tag chain around our neck, keep it handy and accessible. We'd open one of the small cans that it contained crackers, whatever, one about so high, and we'd bend it around the edges so that air could get in. We'd set that up on the ground, and we'd rob some C4 explosive from one of these Claymore mines. Like a little small ball of it. It didn't take much. Put that in that makeshift stove, light it with a match, and it would burn very intensely. We'd put a coffee or a meal on top of that little stove, and that intense heat from the C4 burning would get up to several thousand degrees probably. In 2 or 3 seconds, we had us a good hot meal there.
And of course, you always had to remember to open the top of that can first.
Right.
Because it might blow up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But occasionally
we would get some hot rations. They'd bring them out in these Mermite cans from on a chopper. Usually a Huey would bring them out and fly them to us, and that was a great day. When the hot meals would come out, and of course mail call was a second thing that boosted morale.
No, Marmite can was this huge, elongated can that was
Right.
kind of like a metal ice chest of sorts. It was
Right.
insulated and it had 3 containers
Three
inside.
containers inside of it, with a lid on it. It was very sanitary, of course, and the food wasn't probably the best in the world, but it was excellent to us, I'll tell you.
Because it was better than your sea rations.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, sometimes when you got mail, you would get
Right.
what's called a care package.
Right, right. Usually some cookies or whatever, and we always shared our food. One man got a little bit of, let's say, a cake. We shared it with everybody in the group.
Band of brothers.
It was a band of brothers, no doubt about it. Close.
Now, your mom and dad, of course, had been in the service in World War II. They were in the Coast Guard.
Coast
so
Guard.
Mom and dad,
Right.
particularly mom.
Right.
Mom was the one that was making all these goodies for you,
Oh,
and sending
yes.
them to you mainly.
Right, that's right.
Now, nowadays, our troops overseas, they can email, they can instant message, they can sometimes call home.
Right.
You guys couldn't do that.
No.
It was strictly writing a letter
Right,
on a piece of paper,
that's right.
putting it in an envelope,
Right.
and waiting
Waiting.
for the chopper to get there.
That's right.
So the letter could go out.
Right,
So you were not writing a letter one day and mailing it the next.
that's right.
And you're not getting mail much.
Right. Usually about once a week. we'd get
What was
a
it
mail
like
call.
to hear from home?
It was wonderful. It really was. You could tell people when they got a good letter from home, their spirits just were boosted immediately. And you could tell those that weren't getting letters because they were kind of sad, expecting to get something, hopeful every day to hear from a mother or father or girlfriend or whoever. But it was really a treat to me whenever I heard my mother or dad or some friend or my brother or sister or whoever.
Would write you a letter?
Right.
Would they tried to always be upbeat for you?
Absolutely.
No really bad news, so you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Right.
What about what you were writing home? What were you telling
Well,
them?
I was telling them things that I, was doing in the jungle. And, I took a lot of pictures with a little Kodak Instamatic 104, little small
I
camera.
remember- yeah,
I think
I
everybody
remember
over there
those.
had one of those.
I remember
with a little
those cameras.
cassette you dropped in there. I took several hundred pictures while I was over there in the jungle, and I'd send those back to the folks, and they kept them all for me. But anyway, I told them about places I was going and people I was meeting and the friends that I'd made among the Marines.
And you tell them about your living
My
conditions?
living conditions a little bit, but the living conditions were harsh, but at the same time, you could adjust to them. They weren't something you wanted to. We didn't want to live that way forever. We knew in our hearts that we were eventually going have a better day where we were going to be out there.
You're going to be a short timer, and then
right.
you're going to be going back home.
That's right. Of course, about every 8 or 10 days, we'd get to go to the rear. Like we'd walk into Da Nang and go to Freedom Hill. And at Freedom Hill, they had these showers. We could take a shower there, get a haircut. We all tried to keep our haircut real short, you know, so we wouldn't get lice or whatever on us.
Did you have problems with any kind of lice or leeches or anything?
Yeah, leeches. If you got in the streams over there or across the rice paddy, you were just about always going to get a few leeches on you, so you always had to be careful and check yourself.
Doc had to
go up there and take a cigarette and burn that leech off. Or
now tell everybody why you had to hit that leech with that cigarette.
that heat would get him.
It would make him release.
He'd release.
He kind of embed himself down in
right. That sudden shock with that burning high temperature from that cigarette shocked that leech into release.
It's kind of almost like getting something hot in your hand. You're going to open it.
Right. It's just like giving an electrical shock there. But they'd generally release pretty good. But of course, a little bleeding would occur, and you had to put a little dressing on there and stop the bleeding.
Now you're carrying this big medical bag.
Right. We call it Unit 1. The Unit 1 was a medical bag that we carried. It had all types of bandages. We had morphine syringes to give them shots in case, you know, for pain. Of course, we didn't want to give that morphine if they had a head injury or a chest injury and so forth. But if they had a leg that was blown off or something, of course, we'd put a tourniquet on there, and then we'd give them a shot of morphine.
Now, you're carrying this in addition to everything else you're carrying to stay alive.
Right. I had a Colt 45 for personal protection, and I had tried to dress just like the Marines. We didn't have that Red Cross on their helmet like they did in World War II in some places, because the medic was a prime target. He just was.
They were after you, the radio man, and any officer.
Absolutely.
That was identifiable.
Platoon sergeant, whoever. The radio man he was probably the most valuable person there was a radio man, because he was our communication to the rear for our support, for our air support, medical support.
Yes.
Everything.
Because you were only carrying that 45, I'm sure that's why the Marines had to protect you so much, because you really couldn't reach out there and do anything with that much. That was just in case somebody got right in on top of it.
Got in close. That's right.
Did that ever happen?
Yeah.
It did. They got in close to you?
Right. Yeah. I don't like to talk about that.
Okay, well, we won't talk about that, but you did have some close calls.
Right.
Well, we're coming to the end of our show. We got about a minute left, and I want to give you an opportunity. Your mom and dad were in World War II, and obviously that had an effect on you, and obviously they were your role models.
Absolutely. They were patriots, and I just felt like I had to follow in their footsteps to some degree. And I felt like, of course, John Kennedy said, think not what your country can do for you, think what you can do for your country. And that always stuck with me. And when the opportunity came in my life to be a part of the big picture of the war at that time, Vietnam, 40 years ago, it's hard to believe it's been that long, I did what came to me, hit me in my heart, so to speak, to go. And I've never regretted it, never have.
Well, Mike, the Vietnam veteran is probably the most understood and underappreciated veteran out there. But I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service to our country.
Absolutely.
And thank you for being on our show here. And thank you for telling our story to our guests.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching Local Heroes here on WKFK TV7. Join us again next week for another exciting story.